All right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are talking about a movie that came out much earlier this year, but it's one that I've been wanting to do an episode on for a while now, and it's now out on VOD as of this week, and we finally have an episode on it. That movie is, of course, Alita: Battle Angel from director Robert Rodriguez and producer James Cameron, and of course, based on the popular manga that's been around since the 90s, I believe. And this movie has actually been in the works since, God, almost the 90s or something like that. A long, long time. This has been a passion project for James Cameron, and it's finally out, and it has a legion of dedicated fans out there. But then it also got a pretty mixed response when it actually came out. But those of us who loved this movie are hoping that it did well enough. And it kind of did do well enough. But I mean, there's a little bit of a thing around this movie. But I hope it did well enough that we're going to get sequels, because this is a world I want to go back to. It is a very fun movie. And, if you know what kind of movie you're getting into, I think there's a lot of fun to be had. So we're going to get into all of that and a lot more in the conversation with Mike from the Exiles Network. It's his first time on the show, so when we get into the conversation, we'll let him let you guys know a little bit more about what the Exiles Network is. But before we do get into that conversation, I do want to remind you, as always, if it's your first time listening to the show, please make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review us, of course. And you can also find us on Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, and a whole bunch of other podcast apps. And you can also follow us on social media at Piecing Pod and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces. All right, I've been waiting to do this episode for a while. Let's get into it. All right, so with us today, we've got Millennial Mike from the Exiles, who I met on film Twitter a while back, and now he's here on the show. Mike, I'm glad to have you here.
I'm very glad to be here. I love your guys' podcast. I always assume everybody has like a whole battalion of people. I love your podcast, Dave. It's great. I listen to it very regularly, so I'm really happy to be on here and to be breaking down one of, if not perhaps, my favorite movie of the year.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for the kind words about the podcast. But I want to say right here at the beginning, and then I'd like you to introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners. But since you said it's your favorite movie of the year, possibly, I loved this freaking movie, and I don't understand a lot of people who didn't like it, but we will get into that as we're continuing this conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
Why don't we first, since it's your first time on the show, you could tell little people about what it is you do.
Podcasting is my game. I got into it about 7-8 months ago now. Mm-hmm. And if you're not familiar, guys, it's the Film Exiles. If you haven't heard of us yet, we're a very new podcast relatively, but we're definitely starting to make a name for ourselves, I guess, for better or for worse. But but you'll find that out all in due time. But really, we all just got started with this podcast because we were really, just kind of wanting to get our voice out as anyone who does podcasting does. And it's really, started to blossom into something that's been really rewarding and really fulfilling. We have a website going up. We have a YouTube channel. So things have really been going very well. Me and my friend Manu are the ones who kind of built this the podcast together. And it's funny because we all really started on Twitter. It's funny how Twitter brings people together as well as, tears them asunder, but
for sure.
Just depends. Sure. But we all kind of started I started a Twitter DM, and it was kind of for fans of the Man of Steel, Batman v Superman kind of community, because it's kind of hard to find some people that are positive about it. So It kind of started maybe 2-3 years ago. And as time kind of went on, we're like, you know what, like we could sit here and wallow in our own self pity, or we could maybe create a podcast about films that we like. So that's kind of how we all got started, and ever since then, it's turned into something bigger. So we'll definitely, I'm sure at the end of this podcast, we'll probably have some place for some plugs if I may be
Sure.
so shameless.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Chad Clinton Freeman, if you are listening, you need to become friends with Mike here because, as we all know, Chad's favorite movie of all time is Batman v Superman, and he would love to, I'm sure, chat with you guys
Oh
about
wow, okay, yeah,
that.
some
So,
camaraderie going on there, huh?
yes, absolutely.
You're an exile,
So,
my friend.
so Alita Battle Angel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we first connected on Twitter because I had posted something about wanting to do an episode, and then it just never quite worked out. But
Mm.
back when the movie first came out in theaters, and I think you had responded, and then that's when we got connected. And
Yeah.
yeah,
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 it's funny because with Alita Battle Angel, and I guess we're gonna talk more about it later, but
hmm
it was very strange
hmm
from its inception, from its from the early press and the casting news, and just kind of the first trailer and everything. It was definitely an enigma, and I
hmm
think that it turned out to be something um, a lot greater than I think anyone was expecting. Not necessarily from just a pure fiscal standpoint, but just from the fandom and the community. There's I haven't seen quite I haven't seen anything grow as fast and stay as strong as this
hmm
on anything like, current. So it's kind of interesting, to see kind of the atmosphere developing around this movie and the fandom. Because it's
sure,
with fandom and blockbuster films nowadays, it's very there's not a lot of franchises that stay around for a long time. So
sure.
it's interesting to see kind of like, how strongly the community is latched on.
Yeah, and I mean the people who are out there who love this movie absolutely love it. I mean, we're all, we really want to see a sequel. We're looking forward to the home release. People really did connect with it in a pretty major way, the people who did. And it is a movie that unfortunately I think a lot of people kind of had it out for beforehand. I would admit up front that I thought it looked ridiculous with the
Mm.
first trailer. And the second trailer kind of won me over to where I was like, you know what? Actually, this might be good after all. And then I went and saw it and was blown away. And I was like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I love this movie.
To be honest, I was a little bit concerned myself because it was one of those movies. Because around the same time this trailer came out, I believe the trailer for Mortal Engines was
hmm
also out as well. And
Absolutely.
the similarities to both movies, well, there were some. They were heavy CG, cyberpunkish, dystopian-ish
hmm
movies with young cast, young leads, and they were produced by big names
Yes, yes.
and kind of had like a director that they were mentoring, and but the name of the producer was basically what was selling both products.
Right, right.
And so I was really, really excited for both films. Actually, I think I saw Mortal Engines first, and to say, well, I definitely saw Mortal Engines first because it came out late last year.
Right, right.
But to say that, well, I was disappointed.
Putting it bluntly.
I was disappointed. So to see because I'm trying to remember who did the who actually directed that movie.
I don't recall the name of the director. Yeah.
Because Christian Rivers, it was the director, I believe,
Mm.
and the producer. See here, whose name was it?
Yeah, Peter
Yeah,
Jackson
Peter
was
Jackson.
the big name they put on it.
Exactly, exactly. And it's really hard to tell from just the trailer, you know, really the whole film, but it had that kind of, scope and that kind of, fantasy vibe to it that may be something that Peter Jackson would do. So my anticipation for this was high. So, and, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
when that came out, I was like, and I saw it, I was like, oh man, James Cameron. I mean, his name's attached, but is it going to end up like this? So I had my concerns, too. I wasn't
Yeah.
all just hype.
Well, speaking of James Cameron, why don't we get into some puzzle pieces? I'll kick it off with the first one here.
Great.
And that would be Avatar, James Cameron's
Mm,
Avatar. So I think,
cheater.
yeah, I know. So I've said this before. Avatar first one or two times at the theater, I was super in, and then it started wearing off its welcome, and then I tried to watch it once at home, and I was like, "What the hell is this? This sucks." But
Mm.
regardless, though, I think the drive to push technology forward is something that has always existed in James Cameron's work, and Avatar, of course, is one of the biggest. Well, it is the biggest movie ever, still, but
Mm.
the drive to move technology forward, it was the biggest technological leap, and honestly, before that, it may have been Terminator 2. And I didn't have that as a puzzle piece, but it very well may have been before that. And I do believe that a big goal of this movie, Alita, was to continue that push. And I think the character of Alita is just so beautifully rendered and just such an incredible piece of computer generated
Oh yeah.
imagery that I think it was completely successful. And there was a lot of talk about whether or not the anime eyes and all that were too much, and got to creepy territories and
Mm.
whatnot. But I mean whether it was too much for some people or not, it certainly accomplished what it was going for,
Oh yeah.
and it brought that look to life. It brought that whole now I'll have to apologize in advance to all of our nerdy friends out there, but I'm going to get the words anime and manga mixed up many times through this
Well,
conversation.
you
But
already messed up because you said manga and not manga. So
manga, okay, sorry. Oh,
you
I'm
lost your card
canceled.
already, man. How many minutes has it been? 11
I
minutes and
know.
42, three
Oh yeah,
seconds, man.
I'm done. I'm done. Finished.
Canceled.
Yes,
Adjourned.
absolutely. Absolutely. Done. Finished. But yeah, no, I think that drive to push technology forward is very reminiscent to me of what James Cameron was previously doing with Avatar, especially, and to another degree with Terminator as well.
I to kind of piggyback before I go on my puzzle piece to piggyback off of that. I really agree with as far as the VFX and the way that it was utilized. I don't think that I have ever seen motion, or I won't say motion capture. I'll say performance capture, as James Cameron would like to put it himself,
Hmm.
to this degree. The harmony between the two. I mean, we've seen a lot of performance capture with animation and cartoons and
Hmm.
all sorts of different kinds of animated works, but this blends it together with real humans and live actors so well. And
Yeah.
then to top it off, to even fathom that Alita carried the movie while doing performance capturing.
Sure.
It's amazing. Looking at her face, the emotions, the body movements, the body expressions, language is it's incredible, and it really allows you to connect to a character. I feel in a lot of situations that I connected to Alita more so than some of the other characters, even those of the live actors as well.
Sure.
So that is where I think good VFX that looks nice and really effective VFX and performance capture, that's the line. That's where it's
Mm.
separated. And that's why I think that hands down, no doubt in my mind, this film needs to be Oscar considered. They need to make a spot for this because it was incredibly effective, and I think that it really set a lot of bars.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the time for that award was back with War for the Planet of the Apes, to be honest. But I
Yeah,
think now it's absolutely, again, it's essential that something gets added. It really needs to happen. And, I don't know why, even just from a purely visual effects point of view, isn't it normally like just 3 nominees for whatever reason? I
mm,
mean, they really need to open up the effects. I mean, effects are a major part of what movies are
really.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess I'll go ahead with my A puzzle piece?
Sure, go for it.
So this is going to be another cheat, and then we'll go into some more of the deep cuts, I guess, later on. But that would be the Alita Battle Angel OVA, which I guess you could consider it. You guys do TV shows as puzzle pieces too, don't you?
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I guess video games, comics can be puzzle pieces, or kind
Yeah,
of more.
usually it's like the majority of them are straight up movies, but then we will throw in a TV show here and there, or a game,
Sure.
or even a cultural event sometimes. So yeah, absolutely.
Gotcha. Well, the Alita Battle Angel OVA, it came out in the early 2000s, I believe, and it was I think a two-part, essentially a movie. Um, OVAs are original video animations, and they usually are kind of like extra long episodes, and they usually have maybe like two, maybe anywhere from 2 to 5 episodes, depending on how long the movie is. Kind of like a limited series, kind of, but
Hmm.
usually maybe an hour long a piece or something like that. They really managed to capture the essence of the anime
Mm.
in a lot of great ways. Kind of piggybacking again on the whole eyes that they have. A lot of people call them anime eyes, but the thing
Hmm.
is, if you watch the original anime, a lot of the characters didn't have large eyes. They were very narrow, very small in some instances,
Hmm.
or they were bionic characters, so they weren't. Alita's eyes kind of express her humanity, because
Sure.
there's a lot of characters that aren't flesh and blood, but she kind of stands out because of that. Also, narratively speaking, she's a Martian, and when you watch the film, they all of the different Martian characters in the flashbacks also have the same exact eyes.
Right.
So it kind of fulfills multiple purposes. Being that she's the lead character, she's able to express the I guess perception of what anime is to the general audience.
Hmm.
For people who are watching the film and they get the context of it, they understand that her eyes are unique to her DNA in the movie. It's not a meta thing. It has nothing to do with anime or big eyes or anything like that.
Right.
Um, while at the same time keeping the style and the flair of that particular anime, because as we know, anime all have different styles. Some eyes are large, some are small, some are very glossy and shiny. Some are very beady. It just depends on what you're watching. So I
Sure.
feel like they
Sure.
really captured it well. The brutality of it as well. I was One thing I was kind of concerned about is with these large franchise movies, when they're adapting something like this. Alita is a very gritty anime, and
Yeah.
they did a really good job, I think, capturing that grit while at the same time keeping it within the PG-13 um, realm as well.
It really pushes that
Yeah.
boundary quite a bit. I was surprised.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Even it reminds me of the fight between her and Grishka.
Hmm.
That I think pretty much encapsulates, I think, the spirit of the film, because she has this, like, she falls down and there's this like spire of light, and she's like, descending like an angel, and she has this very like, honorable, very like kind of graceful way about her. And then as she starts to fight, she gets more tired and things start to devolve. She starts to become more aggressive until she's doesn't have any arms or legs, and she's
Yeah.
literally growling, at Grishka, blood on her, puppy blood on her face, stabbing him in the eye, shouting obscenities and stuff. So, all that, in one scene kind of really encapsulates the film and the anime, in my opinion. So, yeah, my puzzle piece would be the Alita Battle Angel, or actually, as traditionally called, Battle Angel Alita. If it's a direct translation from the Japanese OVA.
I was gonna ask you actually about that because I was like, didn't they call it Battle Angel Alita before? And I wasn't sure about that, but yeah, I was gonna ask you about that.
Yeah, and
That's
I don't know.
weird.
I kind of like the way that they changed it, and the reason why is because if you say Battle Angel Alita, then you're putting emphasis on the Battle Angel,
Hmm.
right? And with a franchise, the character is the most important thing. So by
Sure.
saying Alita, Battle Angel, you know, it does a lot of things. It one focuses on the character, it makes her the centerpiece of the marketing. And
Hmm.
then also too, if you're gonna do sequels, you can have Alita colon and you can have a different thing. So this was
Sure.
Battle Angel, and then you could have something. So and you can keep Alita there because she's the character. So it actually works on a few different levels.
Sure. Well, that's a great puzzle piece, and yeah, I mean, I wish I knew more about the whole history of the character and all that, but what they did with it, turning it into a movie, I mean, it clearly must have been a pretty cool OVA. I would imagine with the kind of the violence and the cool action and the cool sci-fi and all that stuff. It must have been cool. So I'm gonna go on to my next puzzle piece, which is another anime adaptation and one that also people were incredibly split on. That is Ghost in the Shell,
Mm.
which of course had a lot of controversy over the Scarlett Johansson casting. But regardless of all that, it was a movie that tried to faithfully adapt an anime into a big Hollywood movie with, the biggest possible budgets and
Mm.
biggest effects and big, huge action and just, insanely over the top. And to me, honestly, while if I was going to sit here and compare, I would say that I much prefer Alita Battle Angel. But I actually, at the time, was also a defender of this movie. I did enjoy Ghost in the Shell. It had the right level of just crazy over the topness, which is something. When it comes to action movies, I really enjoy when they just kind of go all out and just like absolutely throw everything at it and just go totally crazy.
Mm.
And I think that this captures a lot of that same kind of spirit in the process of trying to adapt what really is really crazy source material. And it's
Yeah.
a good thing that they didn't try to water it down, even if they did whitewash it. But they, but they, but they didn't water it down at least.
Yeah, it's very interesting because both films are cyberpunk, uh,
Mhm.
based on cyberpunk anime slash manga. Technically, with Alita, it's actually a manga that was then made into an OVA,
Mm.
and technically, this is adapting the manga, not the OVA. So,
Mm.
but as far as it's concerned, it's the same story. So,
Sure.
but yeah, both female leads, both brains in a human body.
Yep. Yep.
It's funny because in a lot of ways, with the controversy that was going on with Ghost in the Shell, this is kind of like a redemption in that way. And
Mhm.
and to make myself clear, I didn't actually think that there was a problem with the casting, in the
Sure.
very same way that I don't think there was any problem with Alita's casting. I think that Alita and I think there was some controversy with Alita's, but it was kind of it was expunged a little bit quicker.
Mm.
Alita is obviously a Spanish, Hispanic, name,
Sure.
so it's also safe to assume that the character was cast appropriately with Rosa Salazar. Whereas with Ghost in the Shell, with Major Kusanagi, or as it was called in the movie, Kira Killian, and she's had other names in the different adaptations because she takes different bodies, different lives, different
Mm.
people. It's much more muddled, and both films have heavy themes about transhumanism in
Mm.
them, becoming more than human, transcending your body and your identity and what that is, and all that. So both films had a lot of that in there,
Mm.
but this one, the narrative kind of had like a free opening to basically, um, like, I guess, an excuse to not have to worry about the same kind of controversy. So
Sure.
by
Sure.
making this film instead of making the other one, they got to avoid the same controversy, while at the same time you could argue they did the same thing because they're both Japanese characters in
Mhm.
a Japanese world. Well, not so much, but that's the whole point. That's why it's so confusing and so
Sure.
and so blah, because it's like it doesn't. Anyway, so the similarities are definitely there, and that's a good point. That's a great piece.
Right on, right on. So, what do you got for your next one?
So this one's a more recent one.
Mhm.
It's kind of a, I guess you could say, an obtuse comparison, but I think that it embraces a lot of the same ideas thematically. That'd be Wonder Woman.
Okay.
It's funny because uh, James Cameron came out and said some things about Wonder Woman that
Yeah.
got
Oh, James Cameron.
and that I will not say that I do not disagree with
Mhm.
necessarily.
Mhm.
Regardless, I have been a vocal as I am about everything, as you know from any of the exiles. We're quite vocal. That I've been a vocal proponent of the idea that Alita kind of actually does what Wonder Woman was trying to do better. Both are kind of these, bright-eyed, youthful women with a heart of a warrior, spirit of a warrior that are they're sent to a land that's brutal, that's harsh, and they basically refuse to let it change them.
Right,
You
right.
know, the whole idea of the battle angel, and then of course, the Themyscirian demigods and all that are very divine in nature. So that also is another similarity between the two. The whole themes of divinity and are kind of in there as well, and acceptance and identity. All those things are very, very similar. Coming of age, you could even say. There's some
Sure.
themes that are also similar there too. The action, and even the love story actually is very similar.
Yeah.
um, so it's kind of funny because he made those comments and he came out with Alita, and like I said, I'd argue that if you were going to make an argument that he's saying, "Hey, I'm going to do this better," I don't know. It's pretty good argument.
Yeah, yeah. I gotta say you're right on that, and I think it's a great puzzle piece. And you're right, all those themes are totally there within both movies, and it's interesting that they both would kind of go for similar ideas and stuff like that. But it's a great story, and it makes sense that so many movies would look at a female hero from this kind of a perspective. I
Sure.
think I think it's a cool thing. And just one note about that, the love story angle is Hugo is no Chris Pine. I just
Oh
want to say
yeah, I think I
that.
mentioned this on Twitter actually, but no. Aside from that, no, because yeah, Chris Pine did an amazing job.
Oh
Gal
yeah.
Gal did a good job, and you know what? It's like I'm not a huge fan of the Wonder Woman film. I'm not like bashing it necessarily. I
Hmm.
I guess I kind of am. I won't apologize for that, but it was an enjoyable film. I watched it twice, day back to back, and it's a good film for sure.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, no, Chris Pine, you can't replace him. I
Ah,
mean,
he's
like,
great.
shoot, they're trying to resurrect the guy, pull him out of the grave. So
You kind of have to. I mean, he needs to be there. But yeah, no, I agree. Wonder Woman, I think is a collection of great scenes with not a particularly great movie around it.
yeah,
Um,
and
it's a good movie though.
yeah, and I don't want to, wax poetic too much on this, but I think that the reason why I say that the themes were done better in Alita, just so I'm not all lip service, I'm actually explaining what my point is that
Sure.
the idea is that they need to come to a realization, right,
Hmm.
that the world is cruel and it's not going to change them, but the world, you can't necessarily change the world. That was a strong theme in Wonder Woman, and it's a strong theme in Alita. And I
Hmm.
feel like at the end of Wonder Woman, and we can get into all the conspiracies and whatever. None of that really matters, but it didn't feel sincere because at the end of Wonder Woman, as we all know, they kill Ares, the god of war, and all the soldiers on the field are literally hugging it out.
Hmm.
They're all friends, and it's like, and then she's has this monologue at the end, and she's jumping toward the screen, and it's like, I'm Wonder Woman, I'll always be there. And as we know, this film takes place in a continuity where shortly after this, she actually leaves for like 100 years.
Hmm.
Yeah, she leaves for 100 years after this because she was disillusioned and she was depressed, and she felt like she had disdain for humanity, so she left, and she went away, she disappeared for 100 years, and she comes back in Batman v Superman.
Hmm.
So we know, knowing that, it broke the narrative, and it didn't make sense. It didn't feel sincere in the moment. So there was something going on there. I don't know what it is, but it didn't feel right to me. But with Alita, she has to come to grips with the fact that Hugo, her human lover in the situation, uh, is basically breaking down people like her for pieces and selling them because he wants
Hmm.
to get to Zalem.
Yeah.
And he's kind of representative of how, I guess Iron City, sucks the soul out of people and forces them to become this darkness in order to survive. And at the end, he does turn around, but the more bittersweet ending, I think, kind of complements the the duality of the situation. How, her goodness isn't going to always, solve all the problems. So
Hmm.
I think that bittersweet ending really, even though I didn't like the character as much, I think that, the acting, the performance capture did a really good job at kind of hammering that theme home. So
Yeah,
I
it
won't
makes a
I
lot of
won't blab
sense.
on too much.
No, but what you're saying makes a lot of sense, and yeah, I mean, I think Wonder Woman's a great puzzle piece. Um, I am going to move on to my next one, and it is also a relatively new movie. It is Ex Machina,
Mm,
um, and I think that looking at Ex Machina as a movie about you know the nature of AI and robotics and how this can fit into modern society. I think Alita is kind of continuing those kind of themes in a lot of ways about what AI and what AI's place can be in our society and living amongst humans and what it means to really be a human or be cyborg or be whatever what's the word singularity. Yeah, and trying to look at that what the future looks like with that.
mhm.
And of course, we're talking about it in the in the framework of a big, huge action movie based on a anime and all that stuff. But still, it is playing with a lot of those themes and trying to see what a future where that happens could look like, and what it really would mean, and the downfalls it would mean for people, because
Mhm.
it's a huge change for humanity, really, and whether or not people are really ready to deal with that, I think, is a big thing that kind of plays a big part in this movie.
Sure. And you also have the themes about, man and machine. Like in Ex Machina, uh, the machine was basically seducing the one of the guys,
Yes.
there. And he was questioning, can a human love a cyborg, or
Hmm.
can a cyborg love a human, same kind of themes that were in Alita.
Yeah.
Also, kind of the attitude of the character, Alicia Vikander's character. I forgot what her name was. Was it Eve?
I believe so. I'm pretty sure.
But Alicia Vikander's character was very, had that kind of bright-eyed, kind of naive attitude, literally born yesterday kind of attitude. Same thing as Alita does. Having no memory of
Sure.
her past. So they both kind of had the same arcs in that regard.
It was Ava, just remembered.
Ah,
Yeah.
Ava, yeah, Eva,
Yeah.
Ava, yeah,
Yeah,
something
close
like that.
close enough. Close enough. But yeah, no, absolutely. And uh Also, another thing, I mean, just a very surface level, but I think the combination of human elements with robot elements
Mm.
is kind of done in a little bit of a similar way, like a lot of the same artistic influence, I think.
Hmm.
So, right on. What do you got for your next puzzle piece?
Um, you're starting to dry me out here.
Okay.
I'm thinking something else that's kind of recent would be Ready Player One.
Okay.
Ready Player One kind of has, once again, kind of a transhumanist kind of themes and ideology there as well. Alita is looking for this perfect body to kind of match her warrior spirit, so to speak.
Mhm.
And in Ready Player One, you have this the main character. He's trying to find like the best VR setup, um, and at the end of the day, it's really the player that matters, and you know not his avatar,
Sure.
or his equipment or whatever he's using. So those themes are kind of similar too. The VFX world that kind of created with both of them. Um, there's a lot of world building and a lot of things to see, a lot of things to take in,
Mhm.
as there also is in Alita as well. So I'd say both those kind of have that similar kind of vibe, a similar kind of feel, and some of the same themes too.
Sure, absolutely. You know what? That's actually, I'm going to jump straight into my next one because it's kind of a great setup for it. Talking about those, the futuristic vibes and stuff like that. And this one's kind of a little bit silly, but it's Demolition Man. And I feel like
All right, Google
Alita,
search right now.
yeah, the world of Alita, it kind of takes a step beyond like something like an Ex Machina, which feels very near future, and it goes to a kind of further distant future where there's a lot of just incredibly sci-fi ideas going
Mm,
on, and just some just like almost like I want to say rules almost of the world that it's building, and some of them kind of make you go like where do they even come up with that, and like and just kind of throwing these things
yeah.
together.
Also, Alita feels very 90s.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it has a very, like, 90s vibe to it, like, all the way down to, like, the teen kind of YA kind of vibe, you get, um and just the dialogue too. It feels, I won't say dated, but it just has that vibe. It's really hard to put a finger on it. Maybe you know what I'm talking about.
I absolutely do, and I think a big part of that is look at the people behind it, Robert Rodriguez and,
Mm,
and
yeah,
James Cameron,
yeah.
two huge names of the '90s. I mean, that's where the biggest stuff that they did, came out, and I think they both still have that in them. I don't think either of them have completely moved on. They push the limits and they adapt here and there in
Mm.
their approaches to this kind of filmmaking, but when it comes down to it, they are products of the '90s.
Also, I misspoke earlier. So the Alita OVA didn't come out in the early 2000s. It came out in 1993, actually.
Oh, okay.
So it is a not product of the 90s. So that
Cool.
also has something to do with it. Also, if my memory serves me correct, James Cameron has been working on this film for 20 years.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So he went over to he took a trip over to Japan. He came back. He talked with his friend Guillermo del Toro about adapting the manga that he read when he went over there
Mhm.
in '99, and they kind of discussed it over. John said he would take the project. Avatar came up later, and he decided to entrust Robert
You're
Rodriguez,
right.
to helm the project. So the project had been, like, the script and all that had been floating around for close to 2 decades. So a lot of the influence from that time, the anime, also contributed to that.
Yeah, I remember, yeah, '99. I remember when I first moved to Vegas, '98, and I had this one weekend and I ended up watching Terminator 2 two times back to back. And I was just like, I was just having a real Terminator weekend. And I was like
Nothing
so
wrong
into it.
with
And
that.
I was like, what the hell is Cameron up to right now? And so I looked it up and I found that, yeah, that this is something he had been developing at the time. And I was looking forward to it. And then it just never came. And then, eventually Avatar came and,
Hmm.
and here we are now. But
Do you think that a sequel is going to happen?
I hope so, man. I really, really do. I mean, I think obviously I would almost take a couple of points away from the movie for how hard it pushed for a sequel. You know
Mm.
what I mean? It's like so much of it is setting up the next movie, and I that does annoy me when these kind of movies. Obviously Marvel is the biggest offender of that. But it
Well,
does annoy me when that
yeah,
happens when so much of the movie is based around setting up the franchise. But I really hope it does happen. I hope we
yeah,
get more of this story. I mean, they put so much into it, and they clearly care about it.
yeah,
And I want to see them get to do more with it.
yeah.
So,
I
does
don't know
that
if I
bring
have
you?
any puzzle pieces
Yeah.
left. I'm puzzle pieced
Okay.
out.
That's cool, man. That is all right. I was just gonna mention one last one, and that is The Matrix.
Mm,
There a lot of the action moments kind of reminded me of what the Wachowskis were doing back with The Matrix,
yes.
and as well as some of the themes about humanity and what being a human is and all that kind of thing.
Mm,
But yeah, mainly though, looking at the action moments, I think there's a lot of influence there, and the way that the Matrix kind of changed the game for action. I mentioned it earlier with my first puzzle piece that James Cameron is, when he makes a movie, he's not just making a movie; he's trying to push things forward.
yeah.
And I think he'd have to be looking back at just how big of an impact the Matrix had,
Oh yeah.
and wanting to do a similar thing in the world of action.
That scene once again with the fight with Grishka,
Hmm.
uh, the slow motion like dodge rolls and flips and all that. I mean, they were that's kind of the benefit of being able to take these performance capture, but then when you need to go complete CG, and
Hmm.
you basically have complete control over where the camera is because
Sure.
you can basically place it anywhere in the CG environment, and they did a really good job like kind of transitioning in and out of that,
Yeah.
and it was pretty spectacular. So yeah,
I
definitely like I can see the Matrix vibes there.
And I think it takes a really skilled director. I mean, I don't know. I like a lot of Robert Rodriguez's stuff, but certainly not all of it. So I don't think that he's someone who I'd normally be like praising this heavily. But I do think to have that ability and to show some restraint
Hmm.
is really impressive because he seemed like somebody who might be like, okay, James Cameron just gave me this huge playground to play in,
Yes.
and just put any camera angles I want, and then all of a sudden we're just like throwing up in the theater because everything is moving so fast and it's just so all over the place.
Hmm.
But he actually doesn't do that. He's very restrained and he makes sure to really be pulling off good action sequences, not just crazy action
Yeah,
sequences.
and I think it was interesting that there was an article I read. I believe it was from Entertainment Weekly. I think it was. Don't quote me on that,
Hmm.
but they were kind of talking about the history of both filmmakers and kind of how they contributed. How it contributed to the actual end product of the film.
Hmm.
On one end, you have Cameron, who is a designer. He's like a designer, and
Sure.
he thinks very from a standpoint of how are things going to work, what pieces go where, what's the implications of this, the the all the scientific aspects
Hmm.
and all that, right? How it all comes together, right? And then on the other end, Rodriguez is an illustrator. He's actually a
Sure.
cartoonist, and he is more about being expressive and very dynamic, and I think that that really comes into play. Like when I was watching Alita, I really appreciated small things like when she's playing motorball
Hmm.
and they throw that heavy ball and she grabs it and she kind of jerks back, and when she's moving she's kind of slower and lumbering because you can really feel the weight there. in that
Mm.
scene. That kind of has that very practical mentality to it. When she jumps into the water and she kind of slows down, she hits the ground, the dust plumes up, and as she's walking through, it feels very practical. And then in scenes
Mm.
like, her versus Gruishka, she can jump around and like float. She can jump super high, land from any distance, jump off of walls and spin in the air. And she's very very free, very much like an anime character in that moment. So that's
Ah,
kind of that like cartoonist kind of vibes there. I'd like to imagine, my head canon is that James Cameron kind of grounded the movie, but then in those like really extravagant, over the top moments, that's where Rodriguez came in and really did his work.
sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do the finished puzzle for Alita Battle Angel, and then we will get to any of our closing thoughts on the movie. So the finished puzzle includes Avatar, the Battle Angel Alita OVA, Ghost in the Shell, Wonder Woman, Ex Machina, Ready Player One, Demolition Man, and The Matrix. Um, I got a couple closing thoughts, and we'll see what you got too. The first thing I just wanted to mention is we didn't ever, I don't believe, bring up Christoph Waltz or Mahershala Ali,
Oh yeah.
or Jennifer Connelly for that
I
matter.
mean,
Three great performances. People having a blast
yes,
doing this.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they all to the really brought to the role. I think that you know, I'll, I really have to hand it. We talked a lot about Rosa, but I really have to hand it to the entire cast. I mean, Christoph Waltz. If you look at a lot of his other roles, you don't really necessarily see him as like a paternal figure.
Sure.
Always.
Sure.
And to be honest, I haven't seen a lot of his other work. So
Hmm.
when I came into this, I didn't really have that in the back of my mind. I didn't have that baggage really with his performance. It really came off sincere to me.
Yeah.
It really did a great job. And I think that characters like Jennifer Connelly and Mahershala Ali, playing it was Chiron and Vector.
Hmm.
They didn't have a lot to do,
Hmm.
but what they did have, they really brought their all, and they really brought like a really nice dynamic and like character to it. I remember when you first see, I believe Vector, if you're looking at the from the perspective of Hugo, and he's in the back of this limousine, and he kind of like does this thing where he kind of spreads his legs apart, and he kind of has his hands together, and he just kind of
Hmm.
does this like head tilted kind of like stare thing, and his glasses on, looking all cool, and just little moments like that really kind of gave you an idea of who these characters were, and they all really brought it.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah, I love Mahershala in this. It's a character, man. It's such a character.
mm,
And one of my favorite parts of the movie, I just wanted to like kind of bring it up real
please.
quick, is towards the end when we're in his office room and he reveals that he's got Jennifer Connelly's brain and eyeballs and all that in the
Oh,
tank.
yeah.
That was so funny, dude. Like I died. I was like, this is like being in like a silly Halloween haunted house,
Mm.
but the sci-fi version of it. And I was like, this rules. I'm in. I'm in.
Well, what's so great about you, Dave, is that you can watch something, and I believe it. Like that wasn't necessarily supposed to be funny, but you
Right,
found
right.
that it's
Yeah.
humorous, and it's like that's like a plus.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Every movie needs a little bit of humor in it, right? So
Yeah. Well, I thought that it worked. I mean, they've shown that this film can play fast and loose with, I guess your suspension of disbelief.
sure.
And I think when I first watched that scene, I thought that the implication was that she was actually still alive. Like,
Hmm.
that like, she was her pieces were all put together inside of a box, being like, supported by some sort of like machine, basically.
Hmm.
And that, But then, if her body parts are being sent up, for someone else's use, then obviously she's not. So,
Right.
or she won't be. So, and at the point, I think the whole point was that, does it really matter? Like,
Right. Exactly. This is just crazy villain shit, basically.
yeah, I was definitely, I didn't know what to think at the time. I was like, oh, that's something.
Yeah, right.
Oh.
So funny. So great. So you got any other closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, not really. It's such a great film. I actually got to watch this film 2 weeks ahead of time at an IMAX early screening, like a fan
Mhm.
screening, and then I watched it again later, also again in IMAX, and I just I encourage anyone who is listening to this podcast who hasn't yet seen it to absolutely, if there's still a dollar show or something, like watch it on the biggest screen with the best sound system you can.
Yeah.
It's spectacular. It's really spectacular. I Some of the scenes, like the chase scene when Alita broke out of the motorball tournament to go find Hugo, and she was on that
Mhm.
rail and the wind was blowing, and I mean, just wow, full
Oh
moon,
yeah.
and she's dodging, and like just poof, it just gets me all my
Fantastic.
feelings. It's fantastic. So so please,
Absolutely.
please give this is the cinematic event of the year, maybe next to Godzilla. So definitely check it out.
I love this movie, and I'm glad we finally got to do this episode. Mike, you got a movie you watched recently other than Alita that you would like to recommend to the listeners?
Recently, yeah. Let me think here. Godzilla IMAX. Definitely check that out. Dark Phoenix. Don't listen to anyone who naysays. Go ahead and watch that film.
We just recorded an episode, and well, actually, by the time this episode goes up, it'll have already been up. But yeah, we recorded an episode.
Mm.
I like Dark Phoenix. I don't care what anyone says. It was fun. So.
Yeah, it's not a perfect movie, and
Right.
there's plenty of positive and negative things to hear out there, but it's super unique. I mean, you have a first time director at the helm. You have Hans Zimmer. You have
Hmm.
Mauro Fiore as the cinematographer, and then you have, of course, this all star cast in this franchise that is kind of out of place in time and space and culture. So it's just really strange and different. I say go watch it. If not to get a conclusion to this story and to this arc of X-Men stories, just to see what the talk is about.
Sure, absolutely. I think it's absolutely worth watching. So, Mike, would you like to plug your podcast and all that?
Absolutely. So you're going to be able to find us on the Twitter verse at the Film Exiles. We have a network account that we kind of, because we have other podcasts as well. We have the Ronin Council for anime. We also have Gray Area, where we have Gray from Not the Popular Opinion. He gives some short little, I guess you could say, audible vocal essays on different subjects to do with film and other entertainment like that, which is great. And a few other projects that we're working on as well. You can catch all of that from either the podcast websites, or you can just go to at the Exiles Net, which is the network Twitter handle, and you can get all that updates there. We have a website, actually. It's going to be the exilesnetwork.wordpress.com. We actually have a few scoops. If you haven't heard, it kind of made the rage on the internet. We were the ones to break the news about Ray Porter being Darkseid. We were first on that. So are we going to stay in the scoop game? Who knows? But you can read that and other editorial there at theexilesnetwork.wordpress.com. And also, of course, my Twitter handle would be I'm Millennial Mike at Velcro16. That's VELKRO16. That's Velcro spelled wrong with a K.
Yeah, and you and your exiles, you guys stay active on that film Twitter, because you're some cool people, and I am glad to get you on the show, and I'd love to have you on again sometime.
Absolutely, it was a blast.
Hey guys, Taylor here from cultureofgaming.com's Power Up Podcast. The Power Up Podcast is the podcast put together by the staff of cultureofgaming.com, a gaming news, review, and opinions website. The staff comes together each week at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on twitch.tv/cultureofgaming to discuss all the latest gaming news, trends, and latest content on the site. And if you're looking for more places to check out the podcast, head on over to Twitter at cog.net and check us out on Facebook, where we are at facebook.com/cultureofgaming and facebook.com/poweruppodcast. We hope to see you guys come over and check out the show.
All right, that does it for our conversation about Alita Battle Angel. We finally got to do an episode on this movie. I'm so excited about it. I am looking forward to watching it again one of these days. I think it might be almost time for me to finally buy a 4K TV, and maybe this will be the first movie I watch on it. That would be pretty damn awesome. But if you haven't watched it before, I do recommend it. Know what you're getting into it. I mean, if you've gotten this far in the episode, you've already heard us talk about it. You kind of know the kind of movie it is and what to expect from it. So, go in with a mindset of getting a crazy over-the-top anime-based video game super robot action crazy movie from Robert Rodriguez and James Cameron. You should know what you're getting. So let's close this thing out. I do want to remind you, as always, to please make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together on your podcast app of choice. You could also rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, which would be really awesome if you did that. And even better would be if you shared the podcast. You could share us on any of your social medias, and we would really appreciate that. We have been getting so many new listeners lately, and it's just really awesome that people are out there listening. And we want to just keep making a great show for you guys. So definitely get in touch if you enjoy the show. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and maybe you'd even like to be on the show sometime. If you would, hey, get in touch with me. Maybe we'll be able to schedule something. So there's lots of movies coming up, so we're going to need lots of co-hosts. So that does it for today. Let's leave you guys with a piece of music like we always do here on Piecing It Together. This is actually a track from my album Head Like Fire. It's a song called Free Fall, and I think it would fit in a movie like Alita quite well. It also happens to be the theme song of our other podcast, Bird Road, which you should check out, as well as Piecing It Together, as well as our new podcast, Awesome Movie Year, that just launched. That's a lot of stuff for you guys to check out. Check out the album Head Like Fire while you're at it. Just keep checking stuff out. There's so much for you to check out. Let's go to the music, and we'll be back soon with more Piecing It Together.
and all points west.